So I just wanted to start this very special episode with a bit of a monologue. Setting up this podcast was definitely not a well thought out, structured affair. It actually started as a bit of a joke, to be honest, and then it escalated into something much more profound. But it all began really back in the early 2010s. I discovered this incredible medium back then, but there wasn't very much UK content in those days. It was mostly American content. And I fell in love with these interview format podcasts created by pioneers such as Tim Ferriss and Lewis Howes, and of course, the mighty Joe Rogan. I just saw immense potential with this medium, and I believed that podcasting would become pervasive across vocations, pastimes, subject matters. And as it turned out, that was indeed the case. And it's obviously an enormous and still fast-growing medium right now. But I wanted to capitalize on this growth and create something that would benefit our brand, Be Digital, the company that I'm a director of, whilst also providing value for others and, of course, having some fun along the way. So I went ahead and bought some equipment, but I didn't do much with it for quite some time. I procrastinated, which I'm sure will resonate with many people. But then one day in the office, we were talking about content creation, and one of my colleagues suggested that we interview CTOs, CIOs, and publish the interviews on LinkedIn as blogs. I thought it was a great idea. It was great timing. So we went ahead, we booked our first guest, Daniel Hume from Satalia, and we headed down to London to do the interview. We had the transcription software ready, a laptop, and we had a backup audio just in case on an old Android phone. The interview went brilliant, but however, the transcription software unfortunately completely failed, leaving us with just this audio recording, which we decided to turn on at the last minute. So heading back on the train to Cardiff, we were quite disappointed that the transcription software had failed, but we listened back to the audio copy and it actually came out okay. And you know what? It actually captured the essence of what we wanted to achieve. So we just made a knee-jerk decision and sort of said, let's just release it as a podcast. I've been talking about doing it for ages. Let's just chuck it out there. We'll upload it into Buzzsprout and then it'll go on to Spotify, iTunes and stuff. And we'll just see how it goes. And it actually was reasonably well received. Not many other people were doing tech podcasts at the time, especially in the UK. So we sent out another couple of emails to CTOs, CEOs, founders. And to our surprise, we had a good reception once again, including the founder of Gusto, Timo Bolt, who agreed to come on. And Gusto were getting quite a lot of publicity at the time because they just engaged with Joe Wicks. So we were quite excited about that when we went down to their offices in London again and recorded the second episode. And we were off. You know, there was no looking back from there. And since then, we've been really fortunate to interview some illustrious guests. I mean, some of the most successful people in the world of tech. We had the pleasure of speaking with Jamie Bartlett, the BBC tech journalist, Steve Hatch, the European VP of Facebook. He's currently CEO of YouGov, I believe now. Bruce Daisley, workplace author and former VP of Twitter, plus the CIO of the Met Office, the CEO of HubSpot, the CFO of MasterCard, the CDO of KPMG. I could go on. I mean, it's quite ridiculous now thinking back, but we feel very blessed to have spoken to these people. The podcast has not only been a fun journey, but it has really provided an incredible amount of value to myself and our listeners. The nuggets of wisdom that have been shared are just invaluable. And today, we're doing a mashup based on one of my favorite questions that we've asked the mass majority of our guests over the years. What advice would you give to your 21-year-old self? So first up, we have Jamie Bartlett, podcaster, author, and journalist extraordinaire. We were absolutely thrilled to get Jamie on, especially as the Missing Crypto Queen. His very successful podcast series was absolutely popping at the time. And to this day, I'm convinced I met Rodger at an event in 2016, but I can't prove it because I can't find the actual email. But anyway, in any case, clearly I'm a fan of that series and I would absolutely recommend it. But anyway, great insight from Jamie and some incredible career advice. I think that what stood out for me was, quote unquote, most people don't know what they are doing. And I think is so true. I think Jamie was talking about, without actually saying it, imposter syndrome and confidence. And you just got to, everyone is blagging it a little bit, and if you tell yourself that, you just realize that you're probably closer to reality. It's you're not alone. And also the importance of making yourself indispensable, acquiring those critical skills that, make you valuable to whatever environment you're in. And also don't worry if you haven't figured out your career aspirations. Jamie didn't figure it out until he was 35. And I know people who still haven't figured it out in their 40s. So, it's a pretty commonplace, and you can pivot and change direction whenever you want. But yeah, look, fantastic interview. But this was a really great answer. It's Jamie Bartlett.
What advice would you give to your 21-year-old self? That guy who didn't know what he wanted to do. What would you say to that guy?
I think it's probably that most people don't actually know what they're doing. And most people in most industries are bluffing. They're nervous.
Yeah, that's true.
Don't fully understand. They're not as confident as they think they are. You won't realize that, 21-year-old, until you're about 35, by which time you've missed maybe the chance to do stuff as well. So people aren't as confident as you think they are. They're bluffing, and they're just as nervous and worried as you. And I've got older and older and got more and more senior in places. And I see, and I realize people are still bluffing, and they're still faking, and they're still pretending, and they still don't know what they're doing. And they're still relying on other people to figure things out. And they still hope someone else is in charge above them to fix everything. So if you can find a niche where you are really confident in what you do, like I tried to do with this social media research, you should be confident. You will know more than the person above you. And they will quickly realize that, and they'll come to depend on you. Like when I used to go, it was very hard to get into this industry. And basically, all I tried to do is get a little opportunity and then make myself indispensable to the person above me by learning something, knowing something, making them need me. So they couldn't fire me, they couldn't get rid of me. And so there's that. And it's also that don't worry if at 21 you don't know what you're doing. You don't know what you're planning. Don't think I've got to figure it out by 23 or by 25 and tie yourself down. Because I didn't really know what I wanted to do until I was 35. I was still fishing around, trying to figure it out. Finally, like I said, finding my thing by probably 32, 33. Finally figuring out the thing I could do that I really enjoyed and that I was good at. And I was freaking out at 25. Like, what am I going to do? I don't know. I should have. I can't enjoy myself. I can't relax. I can't go and maybe travel somewhere because I've got to get on the career ladder, and I feel like I missed things that I should have done. So don't panic, because if you're 21 now, you're probably going to live to about 140, by which time the retirement age is going to be 110. So don't freak out that you've got to figure it out by 30.
Isn't it hilarious when you're like, I look back when I was 18 or 21 and I thought like 25 or 30 was old. Now I'm 42. I'm like, bloody hell, if I was old then, I'm ancient now.
Yeah, but you know what the thing is? I felt old at 27. I think I felt older at 27 in some ways than I do now. Because I felt like, oh my God, I've got to do this. I've got to have that done. I've got to... So it sounded old when I was 18. And then when I got there, I thought I was old. I thought I was so old. Oh my God,
past it
already. And it's only when you're a bit older you realise, why are you worried? You've got time to figure it out. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Completely agree.
Priya Lakhani, wow, this lady was one of the most polished guests we've ever had. It's almost like she'd spent 5 years doing media training. It was bordering on intimidating, but it was an enormously amazing experience interviewing Priya. Just such an impressive individual. Carenza, my co-host, and I were absolutely thrilled to get her on as part of our AI series. And I think so many amazing parts of the interview. But I think in terms of this question, stick with your fundamental values and purpose. Stay true to them, and this will see you through. I thought that was absolutely brilliant. I'll let Priya explain. It's Priya Lakhani.
One question we always ask our guests is, looking back now at your career, what advice would you give to your 21-year-old self, knowing what you know now?
My 21-year-old self? My gosh, just have another cocktail and enjoy yourself now. So it's one of those funny things. I just, my father's always sort of brought us up to say, look, don't live with any regrets, you know, and that's why sort of when we've got an idea, it's sort of built into me and my brother that, you know, just go for it and try your best and work really hard. Just carry on. I think the most important thing is just kindness. I think it's how I was raised. Sometimes I do sit there and I just think, why, particularly because social media gives a megaphone to certain people, or particularly when you're putting yourself out there and you're putting yourself in a very, very difficult position. You're pitching and you're going and you're talking about ideas, and you sit there and just think, I don't understand why can't everybody who wants to challenge and disagree, which is absolutely fine, just always still do it with kindness and respect. I think that's really important. And so, and you sometimes question what's going on in the world, and particularly when you see sometimes global politics, you know, what's happening. But no, it's just to remind my 21-year-old self that those values are still fundamental and nothing has changed. And although life is always through ups and downs, and we all have that both personally and professionally, just stick with the purpose. It's like an armor. It's an armor that takes you through the tough times. It helps you ride through the great times, and stick with the fundamental values of being a bigger person, be kind, be decent, all of that. Because the thing is, and Gareth, this sounds mad because maybe you wanted some tech and AI thing, but the fact is that it doesn't matter. You know, what really, really matters is those fundamental values, because if you have those and you can stick with them, no matter what you see and what people say, then I think it's really about living that fulfilled life. And you will then trailblaze, you will try and solve problems, you will try and move the dial in some positive way. And that's really all that matters. That, you know, with social media, I think there's so many benefits to it that even I don't sometimes appreciate, that I hear other people talking about. I really welcome challenge, and particularly with artificial intelligence, it's controversial. There are people who are very, very worried about the sort of dystopian future, and as you should be, you know, and you should ask those questions, and you should challenge, and you should talk about the ethics, and we all should, and that's incredibly important. But treating each other with kindness is surely, given everything that we're seeing in the world, just the most important thing that we can do.
Absolutely agree. Brilliant.
So when Quentyn agreed to do this, I was over the moon. Canon is such a household brand name, and it's a brand which is synonymous with technology. Obviously, they create cameras, I think, is probably what the thing they're most famous for, but they do lots and lots of other things. And, you know, Canon has been a brand which has been synonymous with technology since way before the dawn of the internet and SaaS and AI, certainly AI. So it was great to get someone on from a long-time legacy brand like Canon. Quentyn gave us one of the best answers and one of the most unique answers to this question that we've ever had. I don't want to spoil it for you. It's about legacy technology and learning legacy technology skills, just because this stuff is completely ubiquitous. And if you can get these skills, then there's so much more demand as people retire year on year. I'll leave it with Quentyn to explain the rest of it. It's Quentyn Taylor. So last question then, Quentyn. Looking back now, you're a very experienced guy. I'm sure you got lots of your career left to go. But just looking back now, your 21-year-old self, what advice would you give to that guy? What would you say to that person right now?
So my 21-year-old self, I would tell that person to buy stock in Apple and Google. Buy as much stock in Apple and Google and
Nvidia
Facebook.
as well, by the way.
Well, Nvidia's relatively
eventually.
late. Nvidia's relatively late into the game. But yeah, Apple, Google, and various other companies would have. I probably wouldn't be having this podcast. I'd be retired on an island somewhere. It's like I'd have told people to invest in cryptocurrency back then.
Yeah. Are you a Bitcoin guy?
No, not really.
Really? Oh, I am.
Too late to the party.
Late? Really? I think it's still early days, isn't it?
Well, I saw it as a scam back then. And to be fair, I mean, there was someone I used to know who was always going on about, like I was going on about running a lot, who was always going on about how much cryptocurrency he had. And a friend of mine went, how much did he have? Because he's disappeared completely. And we kind of like went, my God, if he's still got 3/4 of that, there's a reason why he doesn't talk to us anymore.
That's why he doesn't bother with us anymore.
I think he's got different friends in a different category.
Yeah.
So I'd say that, I mean, but if I was talking to a 21-year-old right now, I would say, look at some of what look to be obsolete technologies.
Yeah.
And get interested in them. Go and have a look at some of the things like AS400s and don't specialize completely, but have a working knowledge. Because when you get the technology and everyone's in cloud at the moment, and there's a lot of money in cloud, but there's also a lot of people in cloud. You take something AS400, there's a lot of money in AS400, and at least there's going to be even more money in AS400, and there's not many people in there. So if you can get into certain technologies, certain
especially
niche
legacy
technologies,
stuff. Yeah.
and remember, you're not going to be able to make your career on something like AS400. Other legacy technologies are available, but you will be able to identify like the sets of legacy technologies which companies will still depend upon. And that's the point. Work out which ones people depend upon and say, actually, I'm still going to do my cool cloud stuff because I want to have that. But I'm also going to pick a couple of legacy ones, and I'm going to have more than a working knowledge. And you'll then become indispensable. If you can become the security person who can look at that technology, you'll suddenly discover if you're a pen tester, well, people will have regulatory reasons to have to do that. And the only person they can call is you.
Yeah, sure. Well, there you go, kids. Learn COBOL, yeah?
No.
Learn about mainframes.
Yeah.
I think that's brilliant
advice. You can pick them up on eBay.
Yeah. It's really good advice, Quentyn. I think it was Elon Musk or someone said on a podcast before that half the world's banking system is held up by mainframes and COBOL code, and it's probably true. It's all legacy tech, and no CTO wants to touch it.
With an increasingly smaller portion of people who are able to maintain it.
Exactly.
So be one of those people.
We need a new generation of AS400 experts. But yeah, no, that's really interesting. I love that.
Helen Kelisky is the the UK managing director of Google Cloud. It was a real honour to have Helen on. What a lovely lady. We've been lucky to actually have 3 senior execs from the Google Alphabet group of companies. And Helen was just absolutely brilliant. I've stayed in touch with her, actually, and still harbour hopes of being able to build a school in Africa with her charity group one day. Helen is a fantastic leader, does lots for charity quite clearly, fantastic leader. This was certainly one of the best interviews we've ever done. And I think the answer to this question was something which has come up quite a lot, which is just don't be afraid to make mistakes. It comes up so much. And also, Helen placed a lot of emphasis on empathy as well, in terms of an incredibly important skill for leadership. Helen Kelisky. Looking back now, and I know you've got a long way to go, and loads of exciting things ahead. Certainly, it feels like we're in the dawn of AI, and I'm sure you're going to be heavily involved in Google's strategy around that, certainly Google Cloud. But looking back on your career, what advice would you give to that person who joined IBM all those years ago when you started your career? What advice, knowing what you know now, what would you say to that person, Helen?
I would tell myself to make the most of every day, to not be afraid to make mistakes. Time speeds up as you get older. So fail fast and learn from it. I would also say treat others the way you would like to be treated. This is the most vital career advice I would ever give. This applies, I think, to both life and business equally. It's an important trait for everyone aiming for success. Every sector and profession depends on interpersonal relationships.
Yeah.
And ambition should never come at the expense of empathy, respect, and open communication. And finally, I say trust is foundational and a thread that should run through everything you do. Not quite final. This is final. Make time for charity work too. It makes you feel grateful for what you have. It's good to give back.
Where do I start with Rodger? OpenAI are such a huge name within the AI space because of ChatGPT and DALL-E and these incredible large language model products that they've brought to the consumer in the last couple of years. But we could not believe it when he agreed to come on. We were so excited. And Rodger just looks at the world in a very different way. He's a very, very creative individual. I felt inspired. Carenza, who did the interview with me as part of our AI series, was absolutely inspired. He was just brilliant. But look, there's a couple of things that just always come up, and be curious was absolutely one of those. And it was the overriding message here, but I'll pass you to Rodger Werkhoven.
Let's maybe finish on this one then, Rodger. What advice do you typically give, or would you give, to fellow creatives earlier in their career who want to sort of pursue a similar career path to yourself? They want to express themselves through AI technology. What kind of advice do you give to those people?
It's not easy because you have to be a curious person. So if you're not curious, but you're a good craftsperson, that if something is invented and that you can be the craft person with it, and you're not at all curious, it is still what it always was: follow your heart. So are you a curious person, and do you think this is fun? Then try it. Try the DALL-E models, the GPT models, the Midjourney, the Stable Diffusion. Try and build your own model with Stable Diffusion. It's open source. But if you don't like it at all and you think it's too technical, there's now extra space also for people that say, I want to be a stop motion animator, old fashioned style, or I'm going to sell handwritten letters with ink, with fountain pen, and sell those because there's the human element is there. There's now also a new demand coming up for genuine human creative endeavors. So my advice is follow your heart. And if you don't like it, don't go with it. Then, you will not be in the industry using this, but you will invent new industries like writing love letters, real human written love letters. So following your heart is still the most important advice, I think.
Lisa Heneghan is one of the most senior leaders we've ever had on in terms of sheer scale of the area that she manages. KPMG are one of the largest, most influential Big Four consultancy firms in the world. So her thoughts on women in tech and AI and leadership was absolutely unbelievable. Guess what? Curiosity comes up again. Lisa's spin on it, letting your curiosity lead you outside of your comfort zone, and then the importance of that time outside your comfort zone, because that's where the magic happens. And Lisa's take on that was fantastic. So it's Lisa Heneghan.
So let's bring this back to you then, Lisa. I'm really keen now. We're going back to you being, in your armchair again, looking back your career. What advice would you give to your 21-year-old self?
Really importantly, it's not to constrain yourself by what you know today. It's to be open to what you could do tomorrow. And honestly, that held me back for half of my career. I didn't realize it. I wasn't unhappy, but I think so many of us, and particularly women that I know, we think we can only do what we know we can do. And it was by having great mentors who said to me, Lisa, I want you to go and do this. I want you to go and lead the acquisition of a business. And I'm thinking, but I've never done that before. But actually what you realize, and we're particularly lucky in companies like KPMG, is we've got all of the expertise. So you can do anything if you have the people around you to support and help. And for me, that's the biggest learning. And I say it to my daughters, regularly. Don't worry. If you don't know how to do something, work out how you're going to learn to do it.
And get good people around you. But what would you say to people, though, who don't have that KPMG support function?
Well, I think it is about networks of forms, isn't it? And whether you have it within your organization or whether it is by accessing external networks, the great thing about the internet now is we all have access to different groups of people and to knowledge. So I don't think it's that you can't access it. I think you have to have an open mind to access it, and you have to be curious. And that's the other thing that, I actually think as an individual, I'm probably not as curious as I should be. So it's one of the challenges I've given myself is to really build that curiosity, because it doesn't matter how old you are, we keep learning. And probably that's what I would say is my luckiest thing, that I've been out of my comfort zone for much of the time for the last 20 years. And whilst it starts being daunting, it ends up being fantastic because we're learning something.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, do you know what? I did jiu-jitsu last night, okay? And I got beaten up 3 times and it was horrible. But when I went to bed last night, it was like, wow, that was incredible. It was just pretty, it was humbling, Just it's so important to put yourself outside of your comfort zone, isn't it?
It is. And I mean, the only other thing I would also say, I'm not an example, a normal example probably of people in KPMG. I don't have a degree. I said to you, I left college, I went to Harrods and did a management training course. So I always know I'm not going to be the brightest person in the room, But what I can do is look at all these amazing people and be very lucky at how I can work with them and how I can learn from them and bring them together to do great things.
Another Big Four consultancy executive and another absolutely inspirational female leader. Catriona Campbell is such a big, bubbly personality. Once again, Carenza was with me, and I felt in awe not only of Catriona, but also of Carenza. These two incredible... It was a pleasure to be on with these two really inspiring female leaders. It was a brilliant interview. I really, really enjoyed this conversation. So Catriona has clearly had some setbacks in her career, and you'll have to listen to the episode to get the story behind that, or the stories behind that. But she emphasized the importance of resilience, and it really felt it was coming from a place of absolute authenticity. And this resilience and just not being afraid to fail, that's the other reoccurring thing that comes up as well, this fear of failure that we seem to inherently have, certainly in the UK. This, resilience and being brave. I think that's probably how I would describe it. Fantastic interview, Catriona Campbell.
You obviously set up a business very early on in your life, a very successful business. You got acquired by a very big company, and then you stayed there for a very long time afterwards. So you've been there, you got the t-shirt type thing as an entrepreneur and as a successful executive in a corporate organization. But I'm just curious as to what advice do you give young entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs early in their entrepreneurial journey?
It's twofold. One is some advice that I was given really, really early on was ensure that you have a commercial person within your organization to help you, or make sure that you build those commercial skills super quick. Because starting out without a well-known brand, starting out without a large team, you need to build up your sales capacity super fast and get out there and start servicing. There is no point getting investment and sitting on it or doing R&D work with it. Get out there, get clients, get early clients, pilot clients. The second thing, I guess, is don't give up. Don't be afraid to stop what you're doing if it's not working. And I know that they do say that, especially in the Valley, don't they, pivot and test and learn. And we transformed our business 3 times before we ended up happening upon the business that we then sold to EY. And we weren't afraid to test and learn. So we started out as a usability expert company. Then we bought a data analytics company. We merged those. Then we merged with a big design agency. And it was by having all 3 skills that we finally created the perfect design agency and technology agency that was successfully bought by EY. So commercial acumen and don't be afraid to fail and pivot.
Fantastic answer. Brilliant.
This episode was brought to you by Be Digital. Be Digital support leadership teams to optimize cost and get more out of technology investments. Be Digital and the team have unrivaled expertise with technology license management and data remediation and are therefore perfectly positioned to help prepare organizations for AI technology capability. And on the last point, Be Digital have just developed a cutting-edge AI readiness assessment, which provides tech leaders with a platform they need to make well-informed decisions about AI adoption strategy in 2024 and beyond. Go to bedigitaluk.com to find out more and get in touch. We did this interview in person, which is I always prefer to do that. It's just not always possible. But I have to say, it's probably one of the only times I've actually been starstruck. Being a lifelong Welsh rugby fan, David Buttress owns one of the professional teams and is highly influential within the Welsh Rugby Union. But we didn't talk too much about that. We talked about the organisation which he built and which obviously launched him as a technology leader, which is Just Eat. I have to say, his story of how they set up Just Eat and the graft they put in the early days to just get that business going was just absolutely inspirational. Walking around East London in the pouring rain, walking into restaurants met with absolute skepticism and cynicism as to why this product, this notion that people would order food online, which is probably alien to most people around this time. I thought it was just absolute gold. What else was gold was his answer to this question, which wasn't as upbeat as the other answers. I think it was a very personal answer. Okay, David has a lot of regrets in terms of the price he paid for success. Okay, the price he paid in terms of his family life. And it's just a stark reminder to remember what is really important, and balance is crucial. Okay, this is David Buttress.
Looking back over the course of your career, you've been there, you obviously had a very successful exit from Just Eat. You're now doing investment, involved in rugby, maybe going back to a 21-year-old David Buttress. What advice would you give that guy?
I should have thought about that. That's an important question, isn't it? I would say probably two things. I would say the first thing is, don't think that you can't have a successful career and a successful home life. The two things are connected. And I always felt like unless I was sacrificing everything to be successful professionally, including my home life, then I wasn't giving enough. So I think I would definitely say to that person, remember to take care of things at home in order for you to perform at work, because I definitely in the end screwed that up. So I definitely give myself that advice, because that caused us a lot of pain for me personally. So I'd equally say to anyone else, when your company building, yes, it's important. Yes, it's your life. It feels like it does feel like it's the end of the world. But the truth is it's not. Your partner, your friends and family, in the end, that's what matters. So, and they like you or dislike you or whatever, whether you fail or you succeed. So I think I'd say to myself, just make sure you get the balance right, because I definitely screwed that one up personally. Yeah. And I don't think that's difficult to do. I just think I was naive, probably got a little bit carried away with the level of focus and determination I had. And so I'd definitely say that. And so the bit of probably personal points in that statement. And then the second thing I'd say is be confident to make and speak up about the changes that need to be made really quickly and clearly, because there were times in my career I felt like, I could have been probably bolder about things that I knew could be better or different or should have not tolerated. So, and that's not about Welsh rugby, by the way, that if anyone thinks I'm drawing a parallel, because I'm not. I'm talking about, I think sometimes as a really proud Welsh person living in London, for example, I wish I'd pushed perhaps the office in Wales a bit more than I did.
Sure.
Because I didn't want to feel like people would think I was doing it for me.
Yeah.
So I let others guide where the decision. So there's things I felt strongly about that I didn't want to overstep what I would have felt would have been influencing others.
Yeah.
But actually, I think that's okay sometimes. If you really care about something, then actually the engineering office in Wales, I wish I had just said, guys, it's in Wales. I know you've done this independent study, you've engaged with all these development agencies, and the report says that, but actually, do you know what?
Yeah.
It would really matter to me to build an engineering office in Newport. So we're doing it. So I think that's an example.
Sticking up for what you believe in a bit.
Yeah, a little bit. I think I was a bit too, I didn't want to what I felt overreach the power of my office.
Is that come down to confidence, do you think? Because at the time, obviously, you didn't know then what you know now,
I think so. Yeah. If I'm blunt, I was definitely came down to a little bit of, I never suffered from imposter syndrome as a CEO. And I definitely, because I went on this organic journey to becoming one really. And when I became a CEO in 2014, I felt natural. I felt ready for it. I wasn't intimidated or worried about it. I felt, I can do this. I know what I'm doing. So it wasn't like that, but I definitely felt, I think Welsh people are intrinsically humble.
I was just going to say that.
I think we're intrinsically humble. So I didn't want anyone to think I was getting too big for my boots, I guess.
Yes.
So we're intrinsically quite self-deprecating. And so I probably, there was one or two things I wish I'd forced through that I would have felt perhaps looking back on it, like that example I just gave you, I thought I should have done that really. Could have done it. No one would have cared. But I didn't want people to think, Dave's been a bit pushy about the Welsh thing.
Yeah, sure. I know what you mean.
Because we're a global company.
Where do I start with Flavilla in terms of big personalities? Flavilla is right at the top of the pile. If you don't believe me, just follow her LinkedIn page and listen to the episode. It's absolutely, both are brilliant. The founder of Black Women in Tech and a super successful entrepreneur in her own right. Flavilla is an absolute whirlwind of a personality. who is responsible for some of the most memorable moments of the Tech Leaders podcast. Yeah, if you want to listen to that one, I suggest you download that episode. But absolutely another inspirational, ambitious woman who experienced being underestimated in her career. And I think she just talks about don't wait to be recognized. Go out and get it. Be confident. Go and get what you want. Okay, which sums up Flavilla. She is an absolute go-getter. And another inspirational female tech leader is Flavilla Fongang. What key pieces of advice do you typically give to young female Black tech entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I love what you said, because actually I was talking to a young girl and she was asking me, and she's at the beginning of the marketing career, and she's like, "Oh, I've heard you speak with Catherine from Accenture during the, on the fireside chat for the Voice in the Shadow." I said to you, I said, I'm going to be honest with you. You're going to have to navigate as being the only Black woman in the room. I'm not going to bring that change tomorrow. I want you to be realistic, but use your power to change the game. Yes. And I said to her, be really good at what you do before you bring those conversations on the table, because then you'll be seen as a villain, as the one that, who are, not supporting the business. So then they will listen to what you have to say. But I say, be comfortable navigating as a single woman, as a single Black woman in a world that is dominated by men. And that's what you're going to have to do. And I wanted her to give a bit of a reality check, not saying, hey, tomorrow you're going to have diversity everywhere. That's not going to happen. And I think the change is happening slowly, but it is happening. But everything that we can do, and I think it's important that she understands as well that diversity and inclusion issue is not a female or Black woman or whatever problem. It's a us problem. So we need this male advocate to talk to us when we're not in those rooms. So find those people who can speak to you and be the voice and talk to those white men, so you don't have to be confrontational and you just focus on the other thing. And that's very important, because otherwise, you stand in limbo and hoping that people are going to wait to be recognized. So don't wait. I guess something that I advise to women in general is that don't wait to be recognized. Go and say it. Brag about you. Man, I'm really good at this. So do exactly the same thing. Brag about how good you are and ask for it. If you don't ask, you don't get. That's someone always tell me, if you want that cookie, I'm not going to read in your mind you want that cookie. Just ask me and I give it to you.
And do you have any tips about confidence? If people are talking to you and looking up to you, and they hear you say that, and it sounds so wonderful, and I can imagine people thinking, yep, I'm going to do it, and then actually coming to do it, it's actually really hard. So what do you say? Any practical tips how you reach into that inner strength?
Okay, I get tips specifically for women that don't apply to men, and I'll explain in a minute. Okay, so the first tip I always say to women is that wear something that, a great dress. And I was about to say, actually, things I was about to say, wear some sexy underwear. Yes? Because when you wear some sexy, I swear to God, you're laughing, but actually it's very serious. Wear some sexy underwear. It will feel very powerful. Only you can see it, but actually it makes you very powerful woman that you look at yourself in the mirror, you feel great. And after that, it comes back to my experience as a personal shopper. Dress well. Power dress, open doors. When you dress well, people respect you. When you go in your tracksuit bottom at Asda, trust me, you don't have a situation when you go at the Ned in your power suit. So dress well. It doesn't have to be super, dress well. Because there's something about how you see yourself really just help you project the best version of yourself and how you represent. And the second thing I would say is that when I'm on stage, so when I do massive speaking gigs and I'm about to get on stage, I visualize myself delivering that talk very well. Because what happened, anxiety is quite often born of imagining the worst that can happen, and therefore you probably can go crazy. But as soon as you have that, recognize it. Everybody deals with imposter syndrome. And we talked about that this month on TTLP Black Community. So everybody deals with imposter syndrome. The question is that recognize it and then control it. So okay, I'm having a moment right now. I recognize it. Breathe in, do inhale, exhale, and then go into your mind where you visualize you doing something how you want it to happen. And you will see how much it calms your nerves and it changes the game. But yes, so for women, wear sexy underwear, men, wear some sexy socks.
British Army veteran, CEO and founder of software development agency Animus Bytes. Sometimes you meet guests who are just on the same wavelength as you, and Tom and I could have absolutely spoken for hours. He's an ex-military guy and is guided by the principles of Stoic philosophy, something which I pay a lot of attention to. Tom typifies what I would regard as an authentic leader who strives to do things for the right reasons. And there were a litany of lessons in this episode that would support that and just generally were gold. Okay, but this question really stood out as well. His answer to this question was certainly an example of that, and the reason why we selected it. He talks about just doing things for yourself, and I remember the quote: "We were, after all, just all monkeys in shoes," which I thought was brilliant. But look, I don't want to butcher it or anything, so yeah, I'll let Tom explain. Tom O'Sullivan. Sitting in your armchair now, looking back, and I know you're still a relatively young man, you've got a long way to go. But
I hope so.
Looking back over the course of your career, I want to basically maybe try and tune into that guy early 2006 who joined the army. Okay, that sort of fresh-faced youngster who didn't really know what was in front of him, but knew he wanted to do something purposeful, as you said. Okay,
yeah.
What advice would you give to that guy right now, knowing what you know now?
I would be after slapping him about a bit. I would say love more and laugh more and get out of your own way and take more risk, because do it early before you've had children and before you get intertwined with responsibilities.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah, get out of your own way and to a point, do it for yourself, not everyone else. You know, no one knows the inner workings of one another. Everybody's scared, and as I said, you know, we're monkeys in shoes. I'd like him in a sort of parental way. I'd like to give him some freedom and take some weight of both obligation and conformity off his shoulders, and just live your life, be who you are, and love a bit more.
I love
basically.
So I was in awe of this next guest, and just as the Olympics has started, it's quite apt to have Jazz Carlin on, a fantastic guest. Obviously, Jazz was an Olympic silver medalist and Commonwealth Games gold medalist swimmer, now working in the tech sector for a SaaS company. And Jazz talks about the transition from Olympian to working for a SaaS company in the customer success side of things. This is a really fantastic episode on every single level. So many memorable responses, but such is her incredible life experience. But it was another example of the power of curiosity. Jazz emphasizes how she has been guided by her curiosity and has always been enamored and curious as to the tech sector, and is really living that transition from Olympian to getting a traditional job is not easy for many people, but she's obviously found that less difficult. And Jazz was absolutely lovely lady, and I just enjoyed speaking to her so much. This is Jazz Carlin. Looking back now then, Jazz, if you could give yourself at the beginning of your career, a single piece of advice, what would you say?
Oh, it's a tricky one. There's probably a few things. I know I mentioned around the confidence.
Yeah.
That always believing in yourself and being able to, you can only do your best. Always give your best and 100%. And I think probably from like a career perspective, it's, learning to always ask questions, never be afraid to ask a question, no matter how small or, if something doesn't make sense. I always just encourage people to ask questions. I'd rather you ask questions, because either that means like it's not maybe been explained as well, or, there's not been an understanding of it. So asking questions, like,
sure.
I love just being able to ask questions and explore and understand. So yeah,
do you know what, Jazz? That is something that holds so many people back, is having childlike curiosity, sort of basically having the bravery to just ask essentially stupid questions. They're not stupid questions, because most of the time they're fine questions, but asking questions which could be perceived as being stupid questions, it kind of paralyzes some people, and they never ask the questions, so therefore they never fully understand things. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, that's exactly what I mean. And for me, I always ask questions, and I always try to understand it as deep as possible, and just being able to ask as many questions and not be afraid. Is you never look silly. It's better to actually develop yourself and understand it further than, go in the unknown and not really quite know. So asking questions, I'd say, is definitely a powerful one.
Yeah, for sure. Greg Jackson is the CEO of Octopus Energy and was one of the most dynamic, leaders we've ever spoken to. There's no surprise this guy is an entrepreneur. He just typifies everything that you would expect. High energy, unsurpassed knowledge of his industry, and just so much advice and nuggets of wisdom in every single answer. It was unbelievable. But he emphasized something which I think was quite unique and was very different to the other answers to this question. Follow the path least trodden. It's probably a typical entrepreneur answer. But he just really emphasized the bravery to do what others haven't done, okay, and experiment to get what you want. So it's a bit more through a lens of an entrepreneur, but it's a fantastic answer. I'll let Greg explain. Okay, so let me ask you this one then, Greg, okay? What advice would you give to your 21-year-old self?
There's real merit in follow the path least trodden. So you take what we've done as a company. On so many big questions, we've had to do the opposite of what industry experts would have said. And I think that goes for any innovative business. By definition, you're innovative because you're doing what others didn't. And that means, by definition, everyone you speak to says like, oh, here's some advice, and there's an expert, speak to them. And actually, they're as likely to send you the wrong way as the right way. So I have tremendous confidence in your own ability to analyze the situation, look at the first principles, and then do it, even if no one else has. It's a pretty good start point.
Great advice, I think, and totally agreed. Joe Baguley is the CTO of one of the most renowned tech companies in the world, VMware. Again, a really passionate, knowledgeable individual, certainly within the domains of technology and business, but also motor racing, which was responsible for a couple of tangents that we went down. But this really stood out for me as something we had to include. So just a quick side note, I've suffered from burnout recently a couple of times in the last couple of years. I actually thought burnout was a conspiracy theory by lazy people, okay, when I was in my far less wise, less experienced self some time ago. Obviously, I had a rude awakening on that front. Burnout is very, very real, and there's a strong possibility you will experience it at some point in your life, especially if you're a very driven, motivated individual. It's very difficult to switch off. It was really enlightening to listen to Joe talk about how he navigates this matter and prioritizes his mental well-being by taking breaks, blocking out time in his diary to have some downtime, how he navigates and manages this. I mean, I thought it was just absolute gold. Really nice guy, super brilliant. Really nice guy, great guest. It's Joe Baguley.
One thing that I'm really keen to get your thoughts on is, what career advice would you give to your 21-year-old self? Looking back now again in the armchair, what would you say to that guy, Joe?
I've thought about this before, actually. I've been asked it, and there's a few things I'd add, and it's very simple. So the first thing is there's no such thing as being grown up. Everyone, no matter how old, is being that age for the first time, and you're kind of working out how to deal with it and what to do next. I'm nearly 50. I've never been nearly 50 before. I'm trying to work out what happens now, My daughter's just got engaged. I've never done that before, so I'm discovering that for the first time. You never finish. No one turns up at some point and goes, well done, you're a grown-up now. You've completed everything. You've reached the boss level, and, here's the end. It doesn't happen that way. I think the other thing that I would add is, don't try and fit yourself into other people's molds. Some of the mistakes I think I've made in my past is where I've tried to change myself to fit in with things that maybe I shouldn't have tried to fit in with. So that dare to be thing, I think, was probably the most releasing thing for me at VMware that we did, and I think that's it. And the other thing is, don't be afraid to take some time out. I think there's times in your life when you can't. So when you can, take that opportunity with both hands. And, there's times when I'm maxed out with things going on in my personal life and public life and things like that, and I'm just like, do you know what? I could just take a month out right now and it'd be brilliant. So if you do get a chance to do that, whether it's when you're 18 before you go to university or when you graduate and you haven't got dependencies or kids or a house or any of that kind of stuff, and you could just go and travel around the world for 3 years, go do it, right? You live for a very long time, right? So go and do that. And the other thing, I suppose, is don't think that what you're going to do when you're 18 or what you want to do when you're 18 is anything like what you want to do when you're 30 or 40. So be flexible in your outlook. Don't stick yourself in a path. So those are probably the ones that I'd highlight most.
Brilliant advice. Just a quick bolt-on question. How do you avoid burnout, Joe?
A couple of things. I block large sections in my diary out. That's one thing. I literally do. I realized that before, when I was traveling all the time, that time was when I had time to myself. Literally just sit there, think, just do nothing. No distractions, no one attracting me, just chill. When you jump into the Zoom world of bang, 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 call, bang, 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 et cetera, on demand all the time. So I freely admit I have sections in my diary just blanked out like 4 hours at a time, right? And it's either marked out as KF for keep free or DRW, which stands for do real work. I
love that.
Otherwise, you never get stuff done. So I think that's it. And I think for me, the other thing is I've always been an adrenaline junkie. You know, if you look back through all my hobbies, I've listed some of them here, you know, mountain biking, clay pigeon shooting, special stage rallying, driving around tracks, all that kind of stuff. Sure. It's because how I chill out, I realize, is by focusing entirely on something else. So my brain doesn't stop. And I've got some kind of condition in that way. I've never been diagnosed. You know, my brain never switches off. But what I do is I go and point that very active brain at something completely different for a while. That means I don't think about other things.
I was really inspired by this guest. Emilia Molimpakis is a PhD, TED Talk speaker, entrepreneur, and founder of Thimia. Her insight on how we diagnose mental health conditions really shocked me, to be honest with you. I couldn't believe how primitive it is, or was at least a year ago. I don't know if it's changed since, but her product that she has developed, the whole vision is to fill this gap. The Thimia use gamification to better psychoanalyze people for mental health conditions. And the way Emilia explained it was nothing short of incredible. I really felt inspired by this entrepreneur. I still can't believe their product is not more lauded and used by the NHS. But the last time I checked anyway, I don't know if that's changed since. But in terms of her answer to this question, Emilia reflected upon being a self-proclaimed recovering perfectionist, which I thought was brilliant. But what really stood out for me was Emilia's emphasis and drawing attention to this notion that sometimes done does indeed beat perfect. I let her explain it to you far better than I can. It's Emilia Molimpakis.
So looking back now to the beginning, to that young, ambitious person growing up in Crete, or maybe student in London, let's say your 21-year-old self, what advice would you give to your 21-year-old self?
I'm a recovering perfectionist. So I would definitely say to myself...
Recovering, that's great.
I am, yes. As a CEO, like in the beginning, you're just like, yes, perfect. No, perfect goes out the window really quickly. I would say learning that 70% is good enough. That's something like 70% done is more than good enough, and just go with it. Yeah. Don't obsess over perfection. That's something I should have learned really early.
Done beats perfect sometimes, doesn't it? You know?
Done beats perfect. But also, if you have a dream of helping people, or you have a certain thing that you really want to do, don't let anyone talk you out of it. Yeah, I let my parents talk me out of neuroscience. I still somehow find my way back into neuroscience. I wanted to do this thing with games. I didn't listen to people saying, oh, let's not do that. It's not commercial. It's not this. It's not lucrative. I wanted to do it. I wanted to help people, and I'm doing it. And whether this succeeds or not, I would not change that for the world.
Yeah, sure.
So it would be kind of just if you want to do this, do it. And if you are an academic, consider leaving it. Like, consider leaving academia if you want to bridge the gap between research and any kind of industry. Academics should be more... we should see more examples of people leaving. Like, I never saw anyone leave UCL in neuroscience to go do something better, let's say. I would have loved to have seen that. It would have been so inspirational.
So picking just 15 answers for this was absolutely impossible. There were so many brilliant episodes and answers to this question that we could have chosen from. Although some of the earlier episodes, we didn't have this question. So we obviously had to rule those out, which is a shame because we had some great guests back then. However, we are really proud of this compilation and I hope that you enjoyed it too. Thank you so much for joining us. Please don't forget to follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn. We're also on Instagram and TikTok, where we do a lot of behind the scenes stuff. Please subscribe on your favorite platform. It really, really helps us, including YouTube. Thank you so much for supporting us on this journey. We look forward to bringing you more incredible guests and more incredible content over the coming years. So reflecting on our journey to 100 episodes over the last 4.5 years, it feels like both a blur and also a monumental leap from recording our first episode on a phone back in 2019 right through to where we are now. Looking back, we've evolved so much. We've become an established podcast, which is reflected in the amount of inbound interest we get from PR companies and people wanting to come on as guests. Ultimately, our goal is to give real people a platform to share their story unfiltered. Whilst we invariably don't have the marketing budget and the production budget of the larger podcast productions, our goal has always been very simple. It's to share authentic stories that inspire people. And hopefully, we've managed to do that. We have so much more fantastic content to come your way, including some of the UK's and international top CTOs, CIOs, and other tech leaders, entrepreneurs, authors, journalists, and those with a great story to tell in relation to leadership and technology and this incredible sector that we're all involved in. Thank you so much for your support. I look forward to delivering more great content to you in the years to come. Thank you so much for your support. Please share and try to amplify the message. We're always looking for new listeners and we're hoping to spread our reach as wide as we possibly can. I look forward to delivering more great content to you in the years to come.